Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Soccer, brought to us by Nintendo. Soccer is another one of the classic NES black box games that were released early on in the NES lifecycle. This is one of the many sports-related titles for the NES, and while of course probably not the best game available for the NES involving the sport of soccer, it's still a pretty fun game, and one that Nintendo has brought back a few times in re-releases. So here we go with Soccer for the NES. You can play the game 1 or 2 player, with 2 player being a versus match, and in the single player, it's actually pretty cool that you get to select one of 7 different teams to play as. And while this is really only a cosmetic difference, the fact that it is included still makes it a pretty cool feature. When you start up a single player game, you can select from one of 7 teams: United States, Great Britain, France, Western Germany, Brazil, Japan, or Spain. You then can select the skill level, which will be playing on the level 5 difficulty, and then how long each half is. And I'll be playing a 15-minute half because while 45 minutes can be pretty intense, especially in a versus matchup, I'm just trying to show you guys kind of the basics of the game and what it has to offer. I'll be playing as the US here, and I'm playing the level 5 computer, which seems to take the colors of Great Britain. Now when the game starts up, you have 5 of your players versus 5 of their players and a goalie on each team as well. And you actually control the goalie at all times as well as your main character. Whoever you're selected on, you control, and the goalie will be affected as well. You also can select basically where you're shooting the ball, because you'll see an arrow located in the goal, and that represents what kind of trajectory you're giving the next shot you take. You either can, of course, shoot the ball or pass the ball. Either way, you'll end up taking the ball and sending it down the field. Of course, when you get close enough to actually take that shot, you want to make sure you press shot and don't accidentally try to pass the ball into the goal, though you can score this way depending upon, of course, where the goalie is. The level 5 difficulty, of course, is relentless, and you're going to have guys on you the entire time. So, of course, the first time you're playing the game, you're probably going to want to play on the easy difficulty, at least to get used to everything. The basic rules of soccer do apply. You have the different types of kicks depending upon what may happen. If the ball goes out of bounds, you'll have a throw-in. If it goes out of bounds by your opponent near the goal, it'll be a goal kick. Or, of course, if you send it out of bounds by your goal, it'll end up being a corner kick. All these different types of kicks and setups can affect some of the strategy in the game. However, with the level 5 opponent, any kind of real strategy is maybe thrown out the window to a degree, because your goal is basically just try to kick the ball somewhere away from the opponent for more than a second or so you can just regroup and catch your breath. Though for the most part, your sprite and their sprite are going to be interlocked on this difficulty. When I'm able to get the ball over here, I'm able to end up getting a nice lucky pass and take a shot because the goalie is too far over to the left near me, and I'm able to put the ball into the goal and I'm getting a point. After scoring a point, you get a nice little celebration of your team before the game ends up continuing. One other thing I really like about the game is the fact you actually can change players a little bit. Whoever you're controlling, of course, if you end up kicking the ball, their ball is in the air, you can actually switch to another player who also may be close to the ball, changing up your strategy a little bit, allowing you to have a little bit more control over your team than some other early NES sports titles. The real key to strategy, though, also is not only being able to control your guy, but always keeping an eye when the ball gets close to your goal, that you can see the goalie and make sure that he's not too far out of the way, so if a shot is able to get taken, you'll be able to get back in time to grab that ball and save a goal from being scored. Just like, unfortunately, some of the other NES sports titles, there's really no kind of story mode or league or season mode by any means. It's just the 5 difficulties, and once you complete a matchup against the hardest difficulty, your only real thing is to, well, replay the hardest difficulty opponent as many times as you want. Of course, trying to beat the level 5 opponent on a level 5 difficulty is extremely challenging. You get a nice little cool halftime show with cheerleaders that come out and celebrate, similar to some other NES sports titles. Always reminds me, of course, of Tecmo Bowl anytime I see cheerleaders celebrating at a halftime celebration. You usually also don't see cheerleaders too much, I don't think, at soccer games, or at least ones that I've been to, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is something that does happen. Either way, once the halftime show is over, we move on to the second half of the matchup. The clock continues to move on most plays, even when the opponent is just sitting there holding the ball, and the clock moves really quickly, so even on a 45-minute match, it's not going to actually take you 45 minutes to complete the matchup. Like other NES black box games, this game was included, of course, on Virtual Console releases on Nintendo Wii, Wii U, 3DS, but also has been included on the Animal Crossing GameCube game. You may see a common theme between the early NES titles and all of them being pretty much included on Animal Crossing in one way, shape, or form. Just how amazing that game really was, and the fact you could actually play these games. Of course, unfortunately, in later Animal Crossing releases, such as DS, 3DS, and Wii, you don't actually get to get any NES games in those titles. Well, that's also because they have, of course, included a lot of these games on the Virtual Console, and rather you get them there than have them for free in your Animal Crossing game. As you've been able to see, that NES Soccer is a pretty simplistic and basic soccer game, but it works pretty well, and like I said, can get pretty intense, especially in the two-player mode. However, there are other, and in my opinion, better soccer games available for the NES. My personal favorite always being Nintendo World Cup. Part of the Kunio-kun series, which you may better know as River City Ransom and games of the like featuring those stylistic characters from Technos, Nintendo World Cup, available on NES and on the Nintendo Game Boy, is a very intense, very fun soccer game and one that I played a ton. There's also the amazing and very unique Tecmo Cup soccer game available for the NES as well. It is part of the Captain Tsubasa series of games, which actually has several games in Japan, but we were lucky enough in North America by Tecmo to release Tecmo Cup Soccer. Now, this game is actually kind of a story-based RPG-style soccer game, and it's one that if you've never played before, I definitely recommend checking out a gameplay of that one. It's very unique and a lot of fun to play. Another really cool thing, and I will end up showing it, I will try to see if I can get the opponent to score near the end of the half here to tie the game up, because if you tie at the end of both halves, you go to penalty kick mode, which is easily one of my favorite modes in any soccer game. Just like with hockey, I love the shootout at the end of a game. The penalty kicks is always intense, and like I said, one of my absolute favorite things to do, and the fact that they were able to include it on this classic NES soccer game is really cool. As the opponent is able to get near the end here, they take the shot. My goalie, of course, is way up, and they end up scoring, tying the game up with only a few seconds left to go. When the clock ends up expiring, we move on instantly to the penalty kick mode. Basically, it's a 5 versus 5 shots on goal. Just one-on-one, you get one shot for each player to take on the goal. Whoever has the most points at the end of this ends up being the winner. It's actually not too difficult, even on the level 5 difficulty, to easily win the penalty kicks in my opinion, and I usually end up getting a 3-0 or maybe a 4-1 final score in the penalty kick mode, but it's still really cool the fact that they included this, and I like ending a game on it. Now, of course, versus a human opponent, getting a 45-minute match to come down to one of these can actually be a lot of fun. If the opponent ends up missing here, which they end up taking the shot and goes right to my goalie, and with that, I end up winning the penalty shootout 3-0, and I end up winning the game. My team then celebrates a little bit on the field before the game ends up going back to the main title screen, and you can start the fun all over again. However, with that, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.